Hi, my name is Aaron Keith Hawkins. I'm the author of Million Dollar Influence and the host of the Unbreakable Success podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about relationships and leadership and how each of us can step up our game in each. Stay tuned, my friends.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, are you committed to up-leveling your leadership? Well, today we ask, what's first, leadership or relationship? Stay tuned, you're about to find out. Remember, you can now chat about this episode or any of our past episodes on our Facebook page. Simply look for Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty podcast in there. And if you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, you're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant, so please get yourself over to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or any of those places. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday. We're all the way from Florida, where our guest today will be living, all the way right now. We've just started broadcasting to Washington, D.C. in the Quantico area because we want to make sure that law enforcement really knows who we are. Yes, and you'll find out why in a minute. Okay, you can also catch us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, a big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. With a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show, we're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also catch us on Spotify, Google Home, and Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, C-suite leader, a leader in any capacity, you know that it all boils down to the quality of our relationships. How we lead those that we lead will depend on our relationships with them. Are they going to follow us? Are they going to find us? Are they going to do what we envision them to do? It all comes down to your relationships that you have with those people. But what does it take to master a relationship? What does it take to have the kind of influence and impact that you need to have to be a great leader today? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. My guest on this episode is Aaron Keith Hawkins. Aaron Keith Hawkins is an author, a coach, a professional speaker on relationship and influence. He's an internationally recognized podcast host of Unbreakable Success and has been featured on that subject matter on dozens of podcasts and radio stations and many media outlets. Aaron also has over 2 decades in leadership experience as a law enforcement executive and has been teaching, coaching, and speaking since 1990. Yeah, he's old. He holds a master's degree in administrative leadership with a focus on professional coaching. His book, The $1 Million Influence, gives you actionable, research-backed insights to create life-changing connections, trust, and impact in your business and your life. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome the author of $1 Million Influence, coach, strategist, and relationship and influence, Mr. Aaron Keith Hawkins.
Dov, you're the absolute best, man. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to hear from me. I mean, you got me that hyped up. You're doing like
this Aaron guy. He sounds
he sounds like he knows what he's doing. Seriously, Dov, it's great to talk to you again. I know it's been a little while since we chatted, so thanks for having me.
It has. It's great to have you on, man. I appreciate it. So let's start here because we're talking about influence and relationships. Who is someone that we would likely not know who's been a major influence on your life?
Absolutely, by far, I would have to say, just because of when it all started, is my father, easily. He passed away back in '94, but by far, he's the biggest influence to this day. When it comes to the full arc of my life, he's the biggest influence I ever had.
How so? Tell us how his influence and impacted your life. Because impact and influence is not always the positive.
Absolutely, absolutely. In many ways, he's number one. He was very understated. I learned a ton from him, and it's one of those situations where I realized how much I learned much later in life, even after he was gone. And as my career evolved and I began researching and teaching about what I do today about relationships and influence, I realized how much he influenced the way I interacted in my relationships. He was very much, he was a businessman. He owned a real estate company, insurance company. But when I met people after he was gone, nobody ever talked about him in a business context. People would find me and say, "You're John Hawkins' son." And I'd look almost accusatory and I'd say, "Yeah." And they would start talking about him as a person and how well he treated them. And just, it always came down to the relationship they had with him. Nobody ever spoke to me about, John the brilliant businessman or any of those things. It was always about something to do with the relationship that they had with him and he had with them or their family. And that really hit me to the core, especially as I grew and began doing what I do, both in my, my business career and in my law enforcement career. That was a big impact in helping me understand how effective and how authentic that kind of, those kinds of relationships are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love the fact that your dad was a businessman, but people didn't talk about him in a business context. They talked about him in a relational concept, which is a great way to learn.
Yeah.
I said in the intro that you have a background as a law enforcement executive.
Yeah.
That's a weird title. We think of law enforcement as a policeman, as a sheriff, as, something like that. But law enforcement executive, does that mean that you wore a suit and tie to work and arrested only white collar crimes?
On occasion, I did wear the suits and ties every once in a while. No, I spent actually the better half of my 25-year career now in an office in the C-suite doing budgeting, the administrative side of keeping an agency running. And I started that from very early, probably halfway through my career. Even as a sergeant, I got stuck in an office and assigned to administrative roles. And I just spent the past, decade and a half in the executive suite and doing all that less than exciting stuff. Although I did get to spend 15 years on a SWAT team before I got to do that. So I did have some fun.
15 years on a SWAT team first.
Yes. I had some fun.
Shoved in an office?
Yeah, it was a transition.
So tell me, at what point did you want to kill yourself? Because that must have been quite challenging. Because, I imagine SWAT team is high adrenaline.
Sure.
And now here's a bunch of numbers for you to crunch.
Yes.
Seems like it might lack a little bit of that adrenaline. Just tonight.
The upside was I wasn't alone. I got to share in the suffering because some of the guys I spent years on a team with, they wound up getting promoted up. So we were all sitting in there going, when did this happen to us?
When did we get this old?
Yeah, how did this happen?
Because I thought it would be an interesting thing to know.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
Having said that, you were part of the FBI National Academy, which is by invitation only. You got to be part of advanced leadership studies alongside delegates from dozens of other countries around the world. So tell us a little bit about that, because I know that's had a lot of impact and influence on you and what it is that you do today.
Absolutely. That was one of the, professionally, probably the most eye-opening experience when it came to the idea of leadership. The reason being, I'll give you a simple example. And yes, getting into to go to the National Academy, it is invitation only. You get a letter from the FBI director, whoever it is at the time. All that being said, that was fun and cool. But to give you an example, the first weekend I was there, I remember going out, there's a jogging track there on Quantico. And so I went out there to take a quick run, and there's one guy out there finishing off his run and he's winded. So introduced myself, just got there. I noticed people from all over the world and wound up being a gentleman from Pakistan. So we sat down and talked and had a conversation. And long story short, we probably had a good 45 minute to an hour conversation that day. And one of the things that struck me as so odd is that no matter where you are in the world, leadership issues are leadership issues. I mean, you are dealing with people. And it was so, to me, it was so eye-opening to be able to have that conversation, just start talking about what we did and, you know, the type we supervised, the issues we had, the challenges we had. And we were both speaking the exact same language, even though him and I were from completely different sides of the world, completely different problems in terms of crime itself. He dealt with tons of just, you know, horrific events. But we were speaking the same language when it came to talking about leadership. And that became the theme throughout my 10 weeks there, is no matter who I was speaking to, we all really began to get to know and respect each other and realize in so many ways, no matter, even though we have tons of differences, so much of what we deal with professionally, it's just the same. And it's a good thing, I think, because it makes this whole idea of supporting one another as leaders. You know, we don't have to cancel ourselves out because, oh, I'm from the East Coast and you're from the West Coast, you don't understand me, or you're from Europe, or you're from, you know, a different continent, you're from the African continent. It doesn't matter. You know, there are lessons to be learned that are universal. And that, even though I kind of knew that in theory, to actually have those conversations and have that experiential interaction with some really amazing and really brave and really humble people. Was a lot of fun.
What were one of the themes that really stood out for you as being like, we're all talking the same language? Was there something that really stood out for you?
Easy example was the idea of change and the challenge of communicating why changes are happening, because sitting at the round table, so to speak, as people that are in charge of any organization, whether it's law enforcement or corporate, doesn't matter. And you know, those in that role that make these decisions that are going to affect everyone all the way up and down the food chain, the challenge of communicating that, even if it's small and simple changes, because, you know, it's easy to sit back and say, oh, this is a small change, it shouldn't bother anybody. But understanding that it needs to be communicated and communicated clearly, kicking those ideas around and those simple challenges, but those simple challenges can have the most profound effect on the organization from a morale standpoint, from a communication standpoint, from understanding what the mission is that we're trying to accomplish. That's everywhere. Doesn't matter what country, what continent. It's a universal issue, and there's plenty we can learn.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that, you know, you said something that's really important, is that very often we'll look at a change and go, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
And we don't understand that it might be a very big deal for somebody else.
Sure.
You know, one of my quotes is that courage is subjective. What that means is that there are things that I'm going to do that are going to look incredibly courageous to you that are just not courageous. They're easy for me. And there's things you're going to do that are going to look so courageous to me and so like, wow, how do you do that? And you're like, me, that's what I do every day. Yeah. And I think that's the same with change. You know, it's like, it's no big deal, except if it is. Right? Yes. So I think that's actually a really good universal bonding point in leadership. So thank you for sharing that. That's a great insight. Now you, your book is called $1 Million Influence. Tell us what that means.
Yes.
What does that mean? Because that's an interesting title, but it doesn't, like, I know there's something in there that we need to get to.
You're one of the smartest guys I know, Dov. You're spot on. I struggled with the title. I almost didn't use the title. And the simple story of how it happened was I'd written a book. The book was written about influence, relationships, understanding human behavior, that kind of thing, so we can be better leaders, business owners, people at home. The title, when I'd finished the book, the draft was done, I should say, and I was watching TV one day, and somebody was talking about the idea of, somebody commented that someone had $1 million smile. And it just, for whatever reason, it struck me as, it just made me think. And the concept of, for me, the concept of relationships and influence is that it needs to be sort of like a $1 million smile. It's
Right.
authentic. It's not forced. When you see it, you want to be around. You just want to be around. And to me, the idea of that concept of authenticity and just realness, and not manipulating, but just expressing who you are as a person, not what you're trying to maneuver or do. That type of authenticity in influence is what makes all the difference. When somebody's truly being influential, they're not necessarily, they're not trying to be, and I think you understand when I say it, it's very nuanced. They may, you and I may study influence or read about influence because we want to be better influencers, but we're trying to be authentic about it. We're trying to learn more so that we can be better at who we are and the mission we're trying to accomplish, but doing it in a way that's authentic and it's not forced. It's just natural. We're just using tools that we can use to express ourselves better and influence and may have the impact we want to have. That authenticity was at the core of that title, $1 Million Influence. It's a spinoff of $1 Million Smile. That's where that came from.
Because you and I both have backgrounds in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And, you know, like anything else, it has a dark side and a light side. And oftentimes it is used as a manipulation. And really what you're talking about here, what I see it is that you're talking about being authentically of influence because you give a shit, because you care, because you want to make a difference, not because you want to get a buck out of somebody's pocket or because you want to get them to do something, but because you care enough to have influence and that you want that influence to be important. So let's go into that a little bit, because everybody, it seems today, everybody wants to be a thought leader or quote unquote an influencer. But you say that an effective influencer isn't about more or better even content. It's about something far more basic.
Sure.
What does it take to really be an influencer, to really have the kind of influence that we're looking to have, that we're missing out on?
Yeah, it takes, number one for me, and I usually talk about this as one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to, you know, and I'm using that word intentionally, trying to be influential, is one of the biggest mistakes people make is inattention, the lack of attention. So what I mean by that is a lot of times people will use the idea of influence almost like a light switch. So I'm in front of this audience now, or I have this interview coming up now, or I'm going to go meet with these people of importance now. So now it's time to flip the switch and be influential, as opposed to realizing that influence never stops, because 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter what you're doing, whether you're with people or you are absolutely alone, we are influencing. Because even if we're by ourselves, our thought patterns, our processes, what we're ingesting mentally, what we read, watch, think about, we are influencing ourselves. So for me, the number one key that I stress to people is paying attention to the fact that, and observing the fact that influence is always in play. It's never off. And that's not a big, you know, some people can think of that as a burden, but it's not. It's actually, it's an asset. Like once you realize that in everything we do, top to bottom, big things and little things, it's affecting the big picture of how our life and our business is playing out. That's the key. It's paying attention.
Influence is impact.
Yes.
And we cannot avoid that. The only question simply is, are you having the kind of impact, the kind of influence that you want to have? You are having impact.
Yes.
You are creating influence.
Yes.
With that shitty mood you're in, you're creating impact and influence. With that generous mood you're in, you're having impact and influence. With your impatience, you're having impact and influence. With your manipulation, you're having impact and influence. With your generosity, your kindness, you're having impact and influence. And so really what you're calling us to do is to pay attention to simply that you are having influence. Now you have to decide what level you want it to be at.
Yes, it's that paying attention. Is that I think our last conversation, I think we touched on the idea, if I'm not mistaken, of curiosity.
Absolutely.
And it's paying attention to, okay, what are the results I'm getting it kind of touches back on NLP, really. What results am I creating with this conversation? What results am I getting when I come into a conversation thinking about this agenda as opposed to thinking about the needs of the person? Which avenue usually results in something better? Paying attention like that and being curious about the results that we are creating is absolutely spot on what you're talking about there. Yes.
Now you and I are, we're both relationship guys. We do a lot of relationship leadership. But, I run a program called Authentic Speakers Academy for Leadership. And, and you get your people, you stand up there with the first time in the microphone and they're shaking like crazy, and all the rest of it. And we've all heard the adage that the number one fear of human beings is public speaking. Yeah. I don't believe that for a second. Because I've shown people how to overcome it pretty quickly. What I do know is that what I believe with absolutely every fiber of my being, based on my psychological knowledge, is that the number one fear that people have is conflict.
Yeah.
Everybody's terrified of conflict. They have a conflict in their own head. They have a conflict about a decision they're trying to make. They have a conflict with their wife, their husband, their partner, their children, their best friends, their known friends. And so we're afraid of losing if we have the conflict, so we avoid the frickin' conflict.
Yeah.
And you and I both know how important conflict is and how important conflict resolution is.
Sure.
Talk to us about influence and impact and relationship from the context of conflict resolution and facing the conflicts that we need to face in order to, quote, deepen our relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a phenomenal point of, I'll jump to it this way, or I'll start off explaining it this way. Some of the most productive and relationship building conversations that I personally have ever had came from addressing differences in opinion, just being willing to say, hey, let's talk about this. And it happens all the time. And I think the way people win when they do this is to go into it truly from a place of, I'm going to address this issue, whatever it may be, and have a conversation with this person or persons about it, not with the intention of winning and getting them to buy into what I'm thinking about, but with the intention of listening and actually learning why they think the way they do. Because I found that whatever assumptions we tend to make about people, in some way, shape, or form, we'll wind up drawing that out of a person. So if we go into a conflict conversation with the assumption that this person's just being a jerk and they got some unscrupulous agenda, we will draw that out of the conversation and we'll almost lead them there.
The mind goes looking for evidence of that which it believes to be true.
Yes. But if we go into it assuming, I know this person's, they're a really good person. I'm sure there's a reason, even if I don't see it or agree with it right now, I'm sure there's a legitimate reason why they think this way. Let me learn what that is. You'll discover what you're looking for. By the end of the conversation, most of the time, there are certainly exceptions because they're, not everyone in the world is spreading rainbows and butterflies, but
because there is 5 or 6 jerks in the world, and
there's a handful.
They just run around a lot.
But people tend to live up to what you believe about them. They really do, because that's what we draw out of them. So going into the biggest key that I believe in resolving conflicts is to enter those conversations not with the intention of winning, but with the intention of listening and learning and understanding that person, because we're humans, so we reciprocate. By nature, people tend to reciprocate. So if you go into a conversation and you allow that person to just get it all out, like, look, this is what I'm thinking. Here's why I wasn't happy with what you did or said or proposed or made that change, like we were talking about earlier. Let them get it all out. And then go, and then kind of reiterate to them your understanding of what they just explained to you and give them some empathy. 9 times out of 10, the next thing you're going to hear is, well, tell me what you were thinking. How did you see that differently? Why were you thinking what you were thinking? The next thing you know, two human beings are actually resolving a conflict in a productive manner. It's the craziest thing. People think I'm nuts when I explain it to them, but it winds up being one of the most simplest things to do. And fortunately, I've had the good fortune of seeing that happen successfully inside and outside of my organization and inside and outside of my coaching practice over and over again. And no, it's not 100% of the time. Nothing ever is. No. But it overwhelmingly just works when we have the right intention, when we give up the need to win, in air quotes, if I may.
Yeah, I agree with you. And is that part of your strategy for the 3 fastest steps to healing a relationship?
It is. It absolutely is. Yes. That would be my number 3 in the 3 fastest. The first, very simply, you brought it up, so I want to put it out there. The first in the 3 fastest steps to healing a relationship, by far, number 1 is acting as if it's completely up to you. Meaning, whatever the quality of your relationships are, we have to believe it's up to us. You as a listener out there, you have to believe it's up to you. Dove, I know you well enough. I know we haven't known each other that long, but my interactions with you leads me to completely believe that you feel the same about your relationships. Whatever they're going to be, it's going to be based on your interaction with those people. As long as you're willing to interact with them, we can guide the quality of our relationships. Once we believe that in our core, that this relationship is the dynamic of it is going to be up to me, then we take full responsibility. And when you have responsibility, you have power. It really gives you power, not to control the other person, but to control your decisions within that relationship. That makes the big difference. The second big number 2 is self-care. It sounds completely counterintuitive in terms of fixing a relationship with someone else, but a big percentage of the time, a lot of relationships struggle because the people in those relationships, they're just not taking care of themselves well enough. And if we don't love ourselves enough to take care of us, it makes it very difficult to give complete love and care and truly care about another person if we don't even bother to do it with ourselves, because then we don't have a reference for it.
Right.
Like if we fully care for ourselves, then we're giving ourselves a framework for truly caring for a human being, us. So, and by starting with us and taking care of ourselves in a way that is not from an egotistical sense, but just from hey, I need to be healthy physically, mentally, spiritually, because when I take care of me, then I'm better suited, I'm better equipped to help those around me and have a better impact and give that better example. And then from there, that conflict piece that we were talking about, which is usually the most obvious portion of a relationship breakdown, is when the conflict happens. It's not the cause, but it usually winds up being closer to the end result.
Right.
It's completely changing the way we deal with those conflicts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think until we get to the place where we go, I am the common denominator of all my relationships.
It's a tough pill to swallow, isn't it?
Well, it is.
It can be. Yeah.
It's also anything else is so disempowering.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Because somebody else is making me in a bad mood. Somebody else is pissing me off. And I understand. Believe me, people piss me off all the time.
Sure.
But I have to take responsibility for where that goes from there.
Yeah. So
that first step, I think, is so rare. We live in a victim society. We live in I'm always the victim of them.
Yeah.
As opposed to, hold on a sec, because the bottom line is at a boundary level, if you're not happy with the relationship and you are genuinely doing anything you can, or you've been willing to learn how to do it better, and it's not possible, then you also have the power to walk away. And that's, I think, what people forget.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're not a victim of this at any possible level. And I love that about what you're saying, is that stepping out of that space.
Yeah. And it's, to your point of, it really, it's a power piece, because the problem with not doing that, the problem with saying, well, there's a 50% chance it's me, 50% chance it's not, it makes it really hard to gauge. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, somebody learns from whatever medium, whether they read a book or went to a web seminar or got a coach, they learn a bunch of tools that are intended to help a relationship. And then they go and try a couple of them. And then, I'm sure you've heard it before. I tried everything. Nothing works. It's them. It doesn't work with them. You don't understand. They're different. It doesn't work.
Right.
When we give ourselves that ability to put our foot in the door to blame someone else, we're humans. We'll take it. If we give ourselves the out, a lot of times people will run for that out, even if you leave that little bit of crack, as opposed to just assuming it's us. And then, like as you said, if it gets to at some point you realize, okay, this, for whatever reason, this isn't the person that's, we're not in the best place to be in one another's lives right now. Mm-hmm. I've come to accept that, that's just the case. Then we can make those, grown-up decisions and choose to step away.
But the distinction there is that you're doing that as an adult.
Yes.
You're not doing that as a petulant child who's pissed off.
Yes.
Who's going to stomp their feet and lie on the floor in the supermarket. Yeah. Right? But you're actually going, okay, I get it. Sure. We are on a different path.
Yes.
I can respect that.
Yes.
And maybe that will change over time, but at this point, sure, that's where it is. And I really like that. Now, as I said, you've been in law enforcement leadership. You've trained in leadership with FBI and all the rest of it. I'm always wanting to know, is there a most effective, and I realize it's a big question, but is there a most effective leadership tool that you've seen, the one that sort of is the one that stands out for you, that sort of like, da-da, for you,
yes,
that's what it is?
There's one, I believe, and we've somewhat alluded to it earlier, but I'll clarify it here for the purposes of you, the listener. I truly believe 100% that the most effective leadership tool is to demonstrate to someone what you truly believe about them, who you truly believe they are. Because, and I'll give you an example. We mentioned earlier, I spent time on the SWAT team. I remember the first year I joined the SWAT team. It was 13 to 15 of us. And the team leader we had at the time, he didn't train us he made it very clear, he was not training us to be these SWAT guys, SWAT operators. He was training us to do his job. He said, I'm going to train you all to the level of taking over me, taking my position. And he treated each and every one of us as if we were at the top of the food chain. I don't mean he gave us complete autonomy to do whatever the heck he wanted, but he set the bar so high for us and basically said, here's what you're capable of. Let's do it and let's practice it. And this is our bar. We're all going to get there. And it was so subtle. And I certainly didn't realize it at the time, how profound it was. But next thing I know, we were, and you understand, I don't say this to be egotistical. We were phenomenally skilled as thinkers. Mm-hmm. The way we thought about our job and what we needed to do, and the way we had confidence in what we were capable of, whether it was marksmanship skills, reconnaissance skills, administrative skills of operations planning and risk assessments, and everything in between, from the person in the command center of a big multi-agency incident all the way down to just the most basic of jobs. We knew it inside and out, and didn't give it a second thought. We didn't know any better. Right. Because it had been ingrained in us from the very beginning that this is who you are. You are this good, and you're here, and I chose you to be here because I know you're this good. Before, he didn't know how good we could be. He had no idea. This team was new when we started, and he believed it. So from a leadership perspective, and I've seen it played out so many different ways over the years. That is my earliest professional in that career. That was my earliest experience with that. What can happen when you tell someone how great they are, and not just with lip service, but truly tell them and encourage them and back it up and nurture them and give them what they need and ask them what they need and have conversations as equals. We always knew there was a hierarchy. There was no question. This man worked us into the ground. So sure. I don't want to give anyone the false impression that we were all holding hands and patting each other on the back all day. No, he worked our butts off to the point where there were times we couldn't stand him. but he was right there with us the
Mm-hmm.
entire time. And as the years went by, I can see it back looking, if I looked over the timeline of all the names of people that were in that position and where they are today. You're talking about almost 20 years later. There are some phenomenal leaders, many of them outside law enforcement now, and gone into different areas of the world. And they've become some of the most amazing people because, yes, our leader at the time was right. These were amazing people. And they became amazing because they had people who believed that's who they were.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a phenomenal leadership tool to understand that people rise or fall to the level of your expectations.
Yeah,
absolutely. And as a leader, you have to hold high expectations of people, and people are like, oh, it's too hard. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in my work, one of the things I'll say is when I'm working privately with a client, and I will often say to them, there are going to be times where you're going to love me.
Yeah.
And there are going to be times when you're going to hate me. And the reason you're going to hate me is not because I'm being mean to you, but because I refuse to give up on you, because I'm willing to hold you to a standard that you've never been held to before, because you can go there. Because if I won't work with you if you can't go there. So you made it into the SWAT team.
Yeah.
That's the qualification.
Yes.
You made it in. So I know you can step it up. So stop buggering around and telling me that you're not quite as good as Charlie over there. You made it in. Get in, get on with it. And I love that.
Yes.
I think that we all go through things in our lives that turn us around, that make us see things differently, that shift us. What was a turning point in your life, in your leadership, in your business philosophy?
Yeah, that was there's, as with any of us, I think there's been a few, but the most profound by far was what happened to me in 2009. I'd come home from work, went to bed, and I woke up at 1:30 in the morning with this massive pain in my chest. I was 36 years old at the time, healthy. I was a gym rat, eating right. Life was great. I had and still have a beautiful wife, Kathy. We had our daughter, Sophia, was 3 at the time. But I woke up staring at the wall, laying on my side, and I had this pain in my chest. It felt like somebody stuck a hot knife through my chest.
Wow.
And this pain was radiating down my arm. And it literally woke me from my sleep. And at the time, I was also an emergency medical technician. I had been for probably about 12, 13 years at that time. So I started self-diagnosing and very quickly realized these symptoms I was having was very similar to the symptoms of a heart attack.
Sure.
So I sat myself up. And I did what what some of us so-called tough guys think they can do sometimes, is I try to get up and walk it off. So I got up and I just started pacing back and forth by the bed, and it didn't work. The pain just got worse and worse and worse. And it finally dawned on me that if I didn't wake up my wife and have her and let her know what was going on and have her call an ambulance, if I collapsed and didn't make it, she or our 3-year-old daughter was going to find me in the morning. That scared the hell out of me. So I woke her up, had her, and said, "Babe, you've got to call 911. I think I'm having a heart attack." She jumps out of bed. She calls the phone. And she looks at me before she dials, and she said, "Are you sure?" I'll never forget the look on her face. And I paused for a beat, and the pain was just excruciating. And I just nodded my head. And I said, "Yeah, you got to call." So she dials. And as she's dialing, I collapsed at the foot of the bed.
Jesus.
So I was sitting there on my butt. I'll never forget. I was sitting on my rear with my back against the base of the bed. My vision was closing off. I could hear, but the sound was as if it sounded like I was underwater. You know, that muffled sound. I could hear noise, but I couldn't make out words that were being said. And I was completely immobile, couldn't move. And I thought, holy crap. This is it. Like I'm 36 years old, and this is how the heck I'm going to check out. And I began doing the quintessential begging of God, if you give me another chance, there's so much more I can do. And then I was hit with a wave of something that I would not have expected if someone told me something like that would happen to me. Instead of sensing fear in any traditional sense, I got hit with this massive wall of regret. I mean, this regret hit me like a Mack truck. And I suddenly felt like there was this vacuum behind me of all these things and the person I could have been, not for me, but for others, I felt like not felt like, I realized I had been coasting. Because as blessed as I was and still am, as fortunate as I was, I had a great career, wonderful friends. I mean, just some really good people that, for whatever reason, you know, my path led me to be in a really good environment, great family. But I'd been taking what came easily. I couldn't claim at that point to have been pushing myself beyond any sort of comfort zone. Forget about that. I just did what came natural. I was a big guy, so I did big guy stuff. I was, you know, I learned some skills and I leveraged them. But I wasn't trying to be better. I wasn't trying to be to go out of my way to learn how to be a better husband, out of my way to learn how to be a better father, a better peer, a better leader. I was just doing what felt like what was expected of me. And not that that's a bad thing in and of itself, but in that moment when I realized, or at least I thought, my chances were gone, that hurt. That truly hurt. So obviously, spoiler alert, I did survive and live through it. Spent a couple of days at the hospital. Turns out they think I had a mini stroke. There was no heart attack, fortunately. And, you know, strong as a bull these days and doing well. But that was completely, that became a pivotal moment. And that's when, although I didn't know what I wanted to do differently at the time, I knew something had changed and my life would never be the same. It just, I refused to ever feel that sting, that it was like an internal embarrassment that I had left so much on the table. And that challenged me from that point on. You know, we're talking about a decade ago now, and I wouldn't recognize the person that I was back then. I wouldn't know what to say to that person anymore.
And yet at that time,
yeah,
you probably thought you were top of your game.
Yeah, things were good. Things were great.
Right.
Yep.
And I think this is one of the great awakenings that so many people get is if you ask them today, how's it going? Great.
Yeah.
You know, how you doing? Great. Yeah. Are you performing at your optimum? No, but I'm pretty great, pretty damn good. Okay, fantastic. Then they have a heart attack or, you know, fall off a mountain or get hit by a bus or, you know, something devastating happens and they go, yeah, I was coasting.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of us can see it, but, you know, it's fascinating that we don't actually face it until we get punched in the head with it. Right?
Absolutely.
You know, until life kicks you in the gazonums and then go, oh, okay, yeah, maybe I should do something else. Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah. You of course are doing you've done a lot of coaching. You do a lot of coaching. What is one of the most common misunderstandings about what it is that you do now?
Probably one of the most common misunderstandings is, you know what, that somehow I fix people. It's just that the casual onlooker is like, oh, what do you do as a coach? What do you fix people's problems? and it's one of those things. It's almost hard to, like, I'm not sure where to start when I respond, if I do respond to a comment like that. But it's understandable. People think that the easiest misunderstanding is somehow I do something to fix someone else. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think if I put my job, I think as a coach or even as a speaker or author, my job I can sum up in one word. It's just perspective. It's just a different perspective. And really, if I were to map anything that has happened to me to improve my life and that of people I care about, it's somehow me and or those people wound up with something that gave them a different perspective and it allowed them to improve their decision making. That's certainly what happened to me. And that is my goal regularly, is to just suck up as much perspective as I can get and just try to put to use that which is useful in anything and everything I learn and share it. And just share it, because certainly the things I learned after I had that event and got out of the hospital, I started studying things I'd never studied before. I'd never been a personal development guy. Tony Robbins was the only person that I even knew of as, someone who made people's life better, because that's what I used to believe, because I used to see him on infomercials, but I didn't study any of this stuff. I just kind of did my thing. But when I learned number one, when I was slapped in the face with some perspective,
I did right away. Yeah.
That was some perspective that I couldn't refuse. But then it made me hungry for more. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And here 10 years later, I probably realize now how little I actually know. And I'm sure you've heard that before. The more you learn, the more you realize you just don't know. And I think that's a beautiful thing about being leaders, about being in business, is that, we're never going to reach that finish line. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want to, because then where would the fun be? Where would the fun be if there was nothing else to learn? So
I agree.
Yeah.
So as we come towards the end of the show, I want to move into our lightning round.
All right.
So what makes Aaron Keith Hawkins cry?
Wow. You know what? I'm going to get real specific of this. The last scene in the movie Men on Fire with Denzel Washington, I am a sucker for stories that deal with one human being sacrificing for the sake of someone else. So if you're listening to this and you've never watched Man on Fire with Denzel Washington, you have to. That's my homework for you. That's me. That really gets me when I see people give of themselves, not because they have to, but because they actually care. That chokes me up in any context. But that's just one that I always get suckered into whenever that movie comes on.
What makes you cry laughing?
My wife and daughter. I love spending time, but there's nothing I enjoy more than spending time with those two and just being ridiculous and watching them. We get to laughing, and they're it for me.
Very cool. What as a leader, leadership takes courage. What's the most difficult, most courageous leadership decision you've ever had to make?
Oh, wow. Honestly, it's when the couple times throughout my career where I've had to recommend cutting someone loose, terminating someone's employment. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. I'm a bit of I tend to be an empathetic person. I care. I'll never forget my first trophy in elementary school was the most friendly trophy. I give a crap about people. I really do, almost to a fault sometimes. So to wind up years later,
good trophy to start your life out.
It was. I think I still have a plaque somewhere in my attic. Having to let someone go and knowing without a doubt it was the right thing to do.
It's fascinating how many leaders will tell me that, in some context, that was a very difficult decision, that letting somebody go.
Yeah.
What has been the most difficult inner demon that you've had to battle, that you've had to deal with?
Believing that, and I still deal with this, believing that I'm good enough to attain the success that I want. Didn't come from much growing up. And, one of the first hurdles for me when I got into the personal development world was starting to believe that people's lives aren't determined by fate or where they came from. This is who you are, and it's just your path. Getting out of that and realizing a path is something that's created. It's not something that you're birthed into. That was a big challenge for me, to actually think I can be more. And that's value. And I keep and it goes in stages. Once I reach one plateau, I'm like, okay, can I do this next thing, or can I do this next thing? And in so many contexts of business and life, am I deserving of someone paying me a fee to speak in front of their audience? Right. That for me, when that started, that was a huge hurdle. Sure. I almost felt guilty getting my first check as a paid speaker. It was the weirdest thing. I'm like, they're giving me this check to talk to them. That it blew my mind. Yeah. Now I love it. It's fun, and I recognize the value and all that. But that was a hurdle for me to believe I was worth it.
I can totally understand that. Yeah. What's a guilty pleasure for you?
Game of Thrones, easily. For sure. Yeah, that's it. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Ooh, that was good, huh?
Yeah.
That was good. We won't say anything else because we don't want to ruin it, bro.
No, don't spoil it.
But I'm mainlining right now, GOT. I understand that is definitely mine too.
Yes.
Yes. And watching the theory videos that people do on YouTube about who the backstories. Like, damn, I'm spending way too many hours in understanding these characters. That's very cool. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
It is. What did you learn in the last approximately 24 hours? What is something you've learned in the last few days?
I'll add to that, just say learned again. Rarely does something go exactly as you planned.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is damn true. That is very true.
Yeah. I'm relearning that constantly.
And in a parallel universe,
yes,
what career would you have?
I'd be an actor. Love acting. I love the big screen. Years ago, I went to acting school back in early 2000s. Did some extra roles, did some extra jobs with Law and Order and TV show called Hack back with David Morse years ago. So I love acting, love the set. I just love that industry. I enjoy being around it. Spend a limited amount of time in it, but yeah, in parallel universe, I'd be on the big screen, having a blast.
So tell us what you would take from that universe and put into this one in what you do today.
You know what? Understanding story, understanding how human emotion works, and sharing that, so that in some way lessons can be learned. I love movies because, as silly as it sounds, in many ways, there's usually some type of moral arc, especially in well-made movies. There's some type of moral lesson behind them. Even horrible movies that I've watched, there's usually, if you look for the moral of the story, it's there. Yeah. And I love that about the industry of filmmaking. So that, I enjoy when I'm speaking in front of audiences. I love using story to make a point, because then I really don't have to make the point. I've expressed it through a story.
And we get the lesson much better through story.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So this has been great. Thank you so much, Aaron.
You're welcome.
When we finish, please tell our audience, I would really like you to give them one practical, like, go do this immediately thing. What would be the practical piece of advice you'd like to sort of leave our audience with?
You know what? Because of the focus of your podcast, I'm going to leave everyone with the best leadership quote that I've ever learned in my career. Is from a place in Pennsylvania by a guy named Bill Westfall, and he said the leadership test is the ability to ask yourself, am I doing the right thing in the right way at the right time and for the right reason? Asking myself those 4 simple questions has been tangibly effective when I've been on the fence about what to do next. Am I doing the right thing in the right way at the right time and for the right reason? If you can answer yes to all of those authentically, you're probably on the right track when you're making a leadership decision.
That's actually a great set of questions, as you said, as a moral guideline. That's fabulous. Aaron, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, sir. We sincerely appreciate you and all the wisdom and kindness that you shared. Please share with our audience where they can find out more about you and all the wonderful resources that you offer.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Doug, first of all, for having me. And I just want to honor you. I absolutely love what you do. I love your energy. And I love the big heart that just exudes from you every time we talk. So I appreciate you inviting me into your world like this. For people that want to get a hold of me, I'm easy to find. You can hop over to aaronkeithhawkins.com. That's Aaron with 2 A's. And from there, you can grab my podcast, get a free copy of my book, grab any other resource that might be rotating through at any given moment. That's aaronkeithhawkins.com. I'd love to hear from you there. Appreciate it.
Fabulous. Thank you, sir. And I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And again, I encourage you to go over to aaronkeithhawkins.com. Go through some of the resources there. You can get a hold of Aaron's book there. You can get a hold of all kinds of great resources there. Like you said, you can tune into the podcast. It's all right there. You can also hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episode by going to our Facebook page. Just simply look for Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as your speaker or strategist for your organization, simply go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com speaking. Anyway, either one of those, you can find all kinds of great resources by going to Full Monty Leadership. Please be aware that the research consistently shows that even the fastest growing companies face the challenges of spending money, energy, and time attracting, training, and developing top talent. And they're losing that top talent way too fast. If you're frustrated with investing in training and developing your talent only to have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. And also remember to stop by Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a triple W, just Matrix like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership Matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197. It's absolutely free to you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you are the common denominator in every relationship you have. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.